I know we're waiting for a few more people to join, but I think I can start and hopefully they will join us. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our information session on the National Endowment for the Arts American Rescue Plan grants for cultural organizations. I'm Lisa Gold, A4's Executive Director, and a quick accessibility check. I am a Hapa, half Korean, half white woman with dark hair pulled up in a bun, wearing an orange hand crocheted sweater. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am delighted to be co-hosting this information session with our friends at the Asian American Writers Workshop. These grants, these American Rescue Plan grants, represent just a tremendous opportunity for our community, and I'm very grateful to the NEA for making a special effort to ensure that we all have the information that we need to apply for these critical funds. So before I turn it over to Lilly Philpot, the programs manager at the Writers Workshop, I'm going to share just a couple of Zoom protocols with you. We are recording this event and we'll be posting it online later for viewing on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, please click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom menu and type your question into the Q&A box, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the slide presentation. And we also have closed captions available via Rev. So if you'd like to enable your captions, you should see a CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen menu that has the words live transcript below it. So just click on that icon to enable the captions. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Lilly Philpot at the Asian American Writers Workshop.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you everyone who has joined us. We're so thrilled to co-host this webinar this afternoon. For a quick visual description, I am an Indigenous woman with short black hair and black frame glasses, and I have light brown skin. I'm in front of a white wall with a number of pictures on it. I'm going to speak super briefly about the Asian American Writers Workshop. We are a national nonprofit organization. We support, uplift, and amplify our radically inclusive community of Asian diasporic writers and readers. We have a number of different programs, and we are committed to the idea that Asian diasporic storytelling deserves a platform and deserves to be told. This year is our 30th anniversary. We were founded in 1991, which is very exciting. And we are also a current NEA grantee and incredibly grateful for all of the work that they do. Our NEA funding allows us to do literary programming. As Lisa mentioned, I'm the programs manager at the workshop, so it allows us to put on 40 to 50 events a year with literary luminaries like Viet Thanh Nguyen, Susan Choi, Gia Tolentino, Wajaha Ali, and many, many more. And it also allows us to ensure that all of those events are free and open to the public. It also supports a program called Create Now that I also oversee, which places teaching artists in high schools and senior centers across New York City, across multiple boroughs, for a really interesting and super important intergenerational programming that introduces them and allows them to kind of flex their creative muscles. We are, again, so grateful to be here. Thank you so much to A4 and to Lisa and Priscilla. And I will turn it back over to Lisa.
Great, thank you so much, Lilly. So before we begin, I'd like to offer a brief land acknowledgement because prior to the pandemic, hopefully we would be meeting in the A4 offices, which are on the unceded lands of the Lenape and Canarsie peoples. But because we're meeting virtually, I'd like to share a digital land acknowledgement that was written by Canadian theater artist Adrienne Wong, as we're all occupying very different physical spaces today. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technologies, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We're using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many Indigenous communities. Even the technologies that we use even the technologies that are central to much of the art that we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous peoples worldwide. I invite you to join me in acknowledging all of this, as well as our shared responsibility to make good use of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. And now I will introduce our presenters, Jenn Chang, who is the White House Liaison and Senior Advisor and Chief of Staff at the NEA. Wendy Clark is the Director of Museums, Visual Arts, and Indemnity at the endowment. Meg Brennan is visual arts specialist, and Taniqua Lindsay is a museum specialist who will be monitoring the chat for us. So I hand it over to you, Jen. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for the introduction, and to Priscilla for your great facilitation, and to Lilly for orchestrating this event and making this thing possible. I will also, on a personal note, say that the Asian American Writers Workshop holds a special spot in my heart as the last cultural space I went to physically before the pandemic in January 2020. I went actually for a kickoff event for the group called Asian Musical Voices of America that was just starting to find its feet in 2020. And today, in fact, was included in a long piece in the New York Times about the experience of Asians in classical music. So I think it's particularly wonderful for me to be here sharing this space with you all. By way of visual description, I'm ethnically Chinese on both sides. I have dark brown hair, dark brown eyes, and I'm about 5'1". I am currently wearing a black sleeveless top, and my background is a blurred bedroom. I also want to extend a huge thank you to my colleagues at the NEA, from whom you'll be hearing a lot more, but their work and dedication and expertise has continued to impress me and floor me every single day that I've been here for the past, since being appointed on January 20th. So thank you so much to the three of you who are on here today. Before I pass the mic to them, I just wanted to speak briefly about what we're hoping to discuss today. The goal is not just to provide a deep dive into the American Rescue Plan funding opportunity, but really to demystify the National Endowment for the Arts and our whole application process annually. We want you to leave this meeting knowing that an NEA grant, whether or not it's this particular opportunity, is absolutely within your reach, and that you have the technical assistance and the tools that you need now, and equally importantly, the contacts and the channels that you need to be able to continue the dialogue. Just a little bit about how we got here. First, in addition to our regular annual grants programs, as part of the American Rescue Plan, the NEA is distributing $135 million. There are two overarching goals for this funding stream. First and foremost, to distribute relief to the field, much needed relief to the arts field generally. And in the same breath, expanding access to federal funds for communities that have been traditionally underserved by government. Of the $135 million, 40% of that goes to state and regional arts organizations for regranting through their own programs. And we will be directly distributing the rest of the 60% to arts organizations and local arts agencies. And that's the piece of it that we're talking about mostly today. Funding will be available for general or operating support, and really the whole program is generally designed to be able to bring a lot of your organizations back into action as we hopefully move out of the acute phase of the pandemic. If you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the biggest priorities of this administration is advancing equity and access for everyone, especially in this moment when we're trying to help organizations rebuild and recover from economic devastation. So I just wanted to highlight a few ways that we're thinking about this, not just in this one small application window, but all the way through every stage of the grant making life cycle. First, I think the biggest piece of it is that we welcome organizations who haven't previously seen the NEA as a resource, alongside our seasoned grantees of all sizes. We recognize that the process for applying for grants is an investment, and we are simultaneously working to slim down and streamline the process as much as possible, but there's always going to be a bit of that that's governed by the federal government. And we thank you even for taking the time to learn more by joining this call. We would love for you to think of this as the beginning of a conversation. Again, if some reason you don't think that this particular grant opportunity makes sense for you, be in touch for the future. We also know that the NEA is really just one piece of a vast constellation of federal funding opportunities. So we would certainly encourage you to also look at the local, state, and regional arts agencies as a starting place, the ones that we mentioned before. We also know that the need in the field is great. So this is a both and strategy as you start collecting opportunities to apply for, at least within the local, state, and regional arts agency network. Those are all, you can potentially apply to all of them. And if you go to the next slide, this is just a lot of the same information brought down a level, not so esoteric, but more like, how does this apply to you? First, again, hoping to make this opportunity as accessible and within people's reach as possible, and also to lay the groundwork for conversations in the future. And again, these are a couple of the ways that we, as an agency, are dipping our toe into the water of pushing for greater access and equity, especially as it relates to eligibility for these opportunities. You go to the next slide. And just to finally put a finer point on the "we are here to help you" message, my colleagues are kindly hosting bi-weekly Zoom Q&As to answer detailed questions as you get into this process. I think the other thing that is important to note, based on feedback from lots of other applicants, is that no part of this process is meant to be a gotcha question. Nothing in here is supposed to be punitive. So if you find yourself stumped or overwhelmed, or really just want to listen in on what others are going through, I think this session is going to be super helpful. I also think that, engaging in regular conversation in those Q&As is also going to be really helpful. And finally, if you'd like to reach out to me directly, my email is changj@arts.gov, and I absolutely looking forward to hearing from all of you. And with that, I will pass it to my colleague, Wendy.
Thanks so much, Jen. And I want to reiterate our thanks to our hosts, Lisa Gold from the Asian American Artists Alliance, and Priscilla San and Lilly Philpot from the Asian American Writers Workshop. I'm joined by museum and visual arts team members, Meg Brennan, visual arts specialist, and Taniqua Lindsay, who will navigate the questions in the chat. We're thrilled that you've joined us. And as Jen said, we are really reaching out and hoping that if this is your first interaction with the NEA, or this isn't quite the right possibility for you right now, that you will connect with us in the future. After this presentation, there will be time for questions. And so you can type them in the Q&A area at the bottom of your screen. And we'll get through, as many as possible, and probably all of them. We understand that applying for federal funding can be sort of daunting. So we just want to really assure you that we welcome the opportunity to connect with you. The NEA is a federal agency, as most of you probably know. We provide funding for the arts in all 50 states, DC, and US territories. And each year we award thousands of grants to provide all Americans with diverse opportunities for arts participation. Check out the grants section of our website for a listing of our regular grant programs, and don't hesitate to reach out with questions. So next slide, please. The American Rescue Plan is designed to fuel the nation's recovery from the devastating economic and health effects of the pandemic. Funds allocated to the NEA in this historic legislation represent a significant commitment to the arts and a recognition of the value of the arts and culture sector to the nation's economy and recovery. Rescue Plan funding is available through two separate competitive opportunities. The first, grants to organizations, which we'll talk about today, and there's also grants to local arts agencies for subgranting. A special note to any local arts agency, if you meet the eligibility requirements, you may also apply to the Grants to Organizations program for general operating support, or to grants to local arts agencies for subgranting, but not both. So the Grants to Organizations program will be carried out through one-time grants to eligible organizations to support their own operations, unlike other NEA funding programs that offer project-based support. Rescue plan funds are intended to support day-to-day business activities, expenses, or operating costs, and not specific program activities. Applicants must be nonprofit, tax-exempt 501c3 organizations, units of state or local government, or federally recognized tribal communities or tribes. Applicants may include, but are not limited to, arts organizations, local arts agencies, arts service organizations, and other organizations that have a 501c3 status. We do not fund direct grants to individuals. Unfortunately, I'll add. The applicant organization must have completed a 3-year history of arts programming prior to August 12, 2021. For the purpose of defining eligibility, 3-year history refers to when an organization began its programming and not when it was incorporated or received the tax-exempt status. Programming is not required to have taken place during consecutive years. If your programming has been disrupted due to COVID, for instance, there are flexibilities described in the guidelines. Applicants must also be up to date with reporting requirements for any previous NEA grant. So we are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and fostering mutual respect for diverse beliefs and values. We intend to make awards that will impact a broad constituency. We encourage applications from organizations that serve populations that are underserved, such as those opportunities to experience the arts are limited by a number of things: ethnicity, economics, geography, or disability. We're also encouraging applications from organizations with small and medium-sized budgets. We're not just here to fund large institutions, which is a interpretation of our goal and mission and record. We are also looking to support organizations from rural and urban communities and organizations that may be applying for federal support for the first time. I'm going to now ask Meg to give you some more details.
Sure. Organizations may submit only one application to this program. Exceptions to the one application rule are made only for parent institutions applying on behalf of one or more separately identifiable and independent components. Eligible local arts agencies may either apply to the rescue plan grants to the local arts agencies category for subgranting, or to this program for general operating support. You may apply also to other NEA funding opportunities for which your organization is eligible, including the Grants for Arts Project program. In each case, the applications cannot have any overlap in costs during the same grant period. You may request a grant amount for $50,000, $100,000, or $150,000. Applications will be reviewed and considered for recommendation only at one of these requested amounts. And an important part of this program is that cost share or matching funds are not required. We are encouraging institutions to select a grant amount that is reflective of the organization's size and internal capacity. Applications will be reviewed and considered for recommendation at the requested amount only. So whichever amount you choose, keep in mind the review criteria when crafting your application proposal, the one that makes the most sense for your project activities. Your application will be evaluated based on the capacity of your organization to carry out the proposal. This program also allows for a grant period lasting up to 2 years, and activities may start no earlier than January 1st of 2022. Rescue plan funds are, as we said, intended to support day-to-day business expenses or operating costs. So these are not for specific programmatic activities. We encourage you to read the guidelines carefully for details about what costs we can support. Support is limited to any or all of the following, which is salary support, that includes full or partial for one or more staff positions. Rescue plan funds may be used to support existing jobs as well as new jobs, or to restore jobs that were furloughed or eliminated due to the pandemic. Fees and stipends for artists and or other contractual personnel to support the services they provide for specific activities as part of organizational operations. Those are also included. Artist fee stipends should be related to work with a tangible outcome, such as performances, presentations, workshops, and or the creation of artwork. This program also supports facility costs, such as mortgage, principal, rent, and utilities, as well as costs associated with health and safety supplies for staff and or visitors and audiences. This includes things like personal protective equipment, cleaning supplies, or hand sanitizer. Finally, the program also offers marketing and promotion costs support. One type of cost isn't preferred over another, so it's up to your organization to choose which costs to include in the request and to make the case within the application as to why these activities are important in relation to the review criteria. So we ask that we encourage you to think about where the funds may make the most impact for your organization, or where this funding might fill a gap that's not currently being funded from other resources. We'll talk a little bit about the review criteria. All applications are reviewed by advisory panels made up of a diverse group of citizens from around the country. Panelists will consider the review criteria of artistic excellence and artistic merit. This includes the significance to the mission and the core work of the organization, the ability to carry out the award as shown by the alignment of the budget and other resources with goals and requirements of the ARP funding opportunity. And as appropriate, the potential to have an immediate impact on the arts workforce, and as appropriate, the potential to serve and or reach individuals whose opportunities to experience the arts are limited by ethnicity, economics, geography, or disability. In terms of process, the panel recommendations are shared with the National Council on the Arts, which makes recommendations to the Arts Endowment Chairman. The chairman reviews the council's recommendations and makes the final decisions on all grant awards. In order to submit an application, it's a multi-step process. Part one includes the application for federal domestic assistance, the short organizational form, which you submit to grants.gov. It's a brief form that collects very basic information about your institution. For part two, you're going to fill out the grant application form through the NEA's applicant portal. This is a web form where you're going to enter the majority of your application materials. That includes your proposed description of activities, as well as budget information. And just as a reminder, grants.gov and the NEA's applicant portal are two separate online systems. And in order to use grants.gov, you must first obtain a DUNS number from Duns and Bradstreet, and then register with the System for Award Management, which is also known as SAM.gov. And if you're a first-time applicant, we say start this process now. You want to allow at least 2 weeks for your SAM.gov registration or renewal to take place. You'll also need to ensure that your organization is registered with grants.gov. And registration and renewals with SAM.gov and grants.gov, they're both federal government systems, and registration is always free. The guidelines on our website have links to these sites, as well as links to video tutorials to help you get started. And NEA staff, we don't have internal access to SAM.gov or grants.gov. So if you run into technical difficulties with either entity, we encourage you to reach out to them directly via telephone or email, and their contact information can be found on our website as well. Because we anticipate a large number of applications for this funding opportunity, applications will be submitted in 2 separate groups, one for organizations with legal names beginning with A through L, and then a second one with names M through Z. These different submission windows don't affect the timing of grant review. It's just a way for us to organize the flow of applications. To determine which group applies to you, use your organization's legal name as it appears in your IRS status letter or in the official document that identifies your organization as a unit or state of local government. We ask that you not use your organization's popular name if that would be different from its official name. And if you're not sure which group to select, there's some helpful tips in the guidelines, as well as please reach out to us. We're happy to walk you through that. Both the A through L group and the M through Z group will have the same Part 1 grants.gov deadline, which is August 12th, 2021. And the Part 2 deadlines for the A through L group and the M through Z group will be different. A through L is August 19th through the 25th, 2021, the closing time of 11:59 p.m. on the 25th. And group M through Z has a submission time of August 27th through September 2nd, again at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. And again, contact us to ensure which group to select as well. And Wendy, I'm gonna turn it back to you.
Thanks, Meg. So these next slides just sort of show you our website. So check it out. The guidelines are available. You click the menu button at the top right of the homepage and then click on grants. Next, scroll down to American Rescue Plan grants, and then select grants to organizations. And read the program description, review the other links on the left side of the page for information, just to reiterate what Meg had said. And of course, if you need to reach us, click on contacts. To access the application instructions, go to the How to Apply page. Part 1 instructions will walk you through how to submit to grants.gov. Part 2 instructions will walk you through how to submit to the portal, the NEA portal, which is uploading of the other materials. Click on the link to the Part 2 PDF instructions. And even though you won't have access to the portal until the dates we showed you before, all of the application questions are available now in this PDF, so you can prepare early. The PDF also includes instructions for getting into the portal. We encourage you to go to the applicant resources area. Technical assistance resources include frequently asked questions, an application checklist, a summary of common application mistakes, a grant application form tutorial, grants.gov and sam.gov resources, instructional videos, and then signups for the live online applicant Q&A sessions that Jen told you about earlier that we're having in the next couple weeks. So the FAQ section covers a lot of ground, but we want to highlight just a few frequently asked questions. So, Meg, can I apply to ARP if I have already applied for another NEA grant this year or other federal relief like the shuttered venue or the PPP?
Yes, you absolutely can. In that capacity, it's important to remember that you can't use multiple federal grants to fund the same activities or costs. So each grant should be funding something different. Additionally, you can't use ARP or any other federal funds in order to meet the matching requirement for other NEA grant programs, such as the Grants for Opportunity.
So usually when we apply to the NEA, you have to submit work samples. Are they required for the ARP applications?
They are not. We're not accepting work samples for ARP.
Okay.
There's no additional support material required.
And rescue plans funds are only for specific general operating costs. What's the difference between a project-based grant and general operating support?
Yeah. So while rescue plan funds may support work that goes into programmatic activity, these grants are not project-based. So in a project-based grant, all of the costs must be related to the execution of a specific project. And in an operations-based grant, eligible costs are not tied to any specific project. So an example of that would be if you include staff salaries for your curatorial team, as well as artist fees and stipends for teaching artists in your education department. Even if these people will not be working together on the same activities, you can include the request. So similarly, fees or stipends for artists and or contractual personnel must support the services they provide for specific activities that are a part of the organization's general operations.
Okay. So before we get to your questions, just a few reminders. If you aren't yet registered with DUNS or SAM or grants.gov, please get started now. Applications have to be on time. So they have to be complete and on time. Late things we can't make exceptions for late applications. Submit part 1 in advance if you can of the August 12th deadline to give yourself time to resolve any issues. And similarly, submit all of your part 2 materials in advance. The hours of heaviest usage are generally 8 p.m. to midnight or 11:59 p.m. Eastern time on the day of the deadline. Avoid using the system at that time. We find that, you know, sometimes people run into additional problems. And then they run out of time that evening to get it done. So here's our contact information on this slide. The next one, let's see. There you go. But yeah, you don't have time to write all that down, but you can review it or just reach out to Meg or myself. I'm Clark W. at arts.gov. Meg is Brennan M. at arts.gov. So, or take a screenshot. Thank you, Lisa. So let's see if there are some questions.
I think some of the questions were posed in the chat and already answered.
Oh, good.
I know that there was a question about use of marketing, can you use marketing and advertising funds? Can that be applied to this grant? And I think that was a yes.
Yes, yes. More promotional activities are a part of the ARP program, so yes.
Great. And then somebody else asked, how do you know which grant size is appropriate for the size of your organization? And yes, I don't know.
Yes, sure. So, you know, based on the capacity of the institution, you know, you're looking at work that a request that makes sense for the institution to take on. You know, we leave that up to each institution to decide for themselves what that amount will be. Remember too that this program is a 2-year program, so you can spread those dollars over that full period of performance. Part of the review criteria is the capacity of the institution to handle those dollars. And you will submit information about the organization's annual information, annual budgetary information. So we do want to see that sort of in relation to the request as well as the proposed activities.
I think those are most of the questions that were in the chat. If anybody wants to post additional questions in the Q&A, please do so. Are people allowed to apply hardware costs? Is that a covered expense or no?
I'm not sure what hardware.
Like computers or like, let's say people are doing programs now, you know, digital, like hybrid programs and don't have like projectors or cameras. Is that an allowable expense under this program?
No, I don't believe it is. I think that's an equipment cost that we don't cover through ARP. maybe Taniqua could help me out there too.
I agree, because it has to be specific to the organization, the continuance of the organization. So something like that would be more project-based for something that they have going on for a project.
Okay. Elaine asked, would staff and artist travel expenses be eligible?
Artist and travel expenses, as long as it's part of the general work of the institution. You'd have to make the case that that was the case. So it can't be tied to a specific, like travel to create a mural. We couldn't cover that under the ARP program. You could apply to Grants for Arts Project for that kind of activity. But for this, the travel costs have to be tied to the general activities of the institution, and you have to make that case.
So if you're a presenting organization and you have exhibitions or artist performances as part of the work that you do, would the travel expenses for those artists be eligible?
As long as it's a general request. So it can't be tied to a specific exhibition presentation.
Okay, I hope that answered your question, Elaine.
Yeah, I know that's a tough one. We get the artist fees one, and it gets tough. And also, that also might be a question that feel free to reach out to me. We should probably have a conversation about that one.
Great.
And some of our other colleagues too, and more in the performing arts, we can, if consult with as well.
Great. I think probably, yes. So, okay. Maybe, yeah, this is probably a good question to take offline with Meg. How would you position artist fees as general operating expense?
So with that, I guess the example there would be if it's like, let's use a family day as an example. So your family day isn't a project it's like it's something that's specific that you're doing like once a year. Like it's more so like a project. The family day would be something that you do multiple times throughout the year. So that's something that you've been doing for some time. It's not one project that you're doing one year and you're not going to do it again. So it has something to do with projects that are continuous and they're not just a specific project for the year.
Yeah, another example would be if you have artists as educators, if you have a program for after school students and you're hiring artists to teach those courses, and that's a program that's been ongoing or it's an annual activity that you do, artist fees related to that would be okay because it's a part of your regular programming, not a special exhibition.
It's almost like a salary expense in those instances, both the family day and Meg's example.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
So something else we wanted to add here is we're always looking for new panelists. So it's really important that we expand our pool, and we've been really diligent about that in many years, but now that we have this extra charge and responsibility to disseminate this money for recovery, we've sort of it's almost doubled our budget. So we have to put a lot of peer review panelists together. So we would love your recommendations, and also for lay people that have an interest in the arts or a particular art form. So, and please consider volunteering yourself for panel service. We also encourage you to stay connected to us through our newsletters. And then finally, here is a graphic that was created just to sort of clarify the process, which shows you both the different opportunities, what will happen, and maybe a screenshot of that's helpful too, but you can always reach out to us. I know that, it's great to have this additional support and we don't want to make it too complicated, but because it was general operating, it was a different animal. So of course, the process is a little different, and it's quicker, it's fast upon us. So take note of the deadlines. I want to thank our hosts again, and the team, the NEA team, and we wish you all great success.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wendy. If we have any additional questions that come to us, we will forward them to you, or hopefully people can reach out to you all directly. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Everyone.